Miss Hilary, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, girl. Uh, Hello and welcome back to the Miscellaneous channel where we do miscellaneous things. I'm Zeleny. I typically cover TV, pop culture, internet trends, and other miscellaneous things on this channel, so subscribe if that's your vibe. So if you're not aware, the How I Met Your Father first 2 episodes came out last week, and it was, not great. I think that was a good drinking moment. Gotta bring the drinking back. I was really excited for the How I Met Your Father reboot. It's not a reboot, they keep saying. They keep saying it's a sequel to How I Met Your Mother, a long-running show with a huge fan base, which I did not watch How I Met Your Mother, so this video won't be coming from a nostalgia angle at all. But the new How I Met Your Father show, you don't have to have seen How I Met Your Mother to understand it. The only reason I was excited for the How I Met Your Father reboot is because it stars one of my favorite people in the world, Hilary Duff. She taught me what dreams are made of. I tried to sort of do a Lizzie McGuire moment today. I'm a huge fan of Hilary Duff, like a lot of young millennial women, but unfortunately, I feel like, this show is not giving. Let's just cut to the chase here. Is How I Met Your Father worth watching? Unfortunately, in my opinion, not so much. It is a multi-cam sitcom. It's hard because I think there is an audience for it, so don't take my word as super solid. This is a franchise that I'm not familiar with. Even though How I Met Your Father isn't a reboot, it doesn't have any of the original cast of How I Met Your Mother in it. They show similar sets and some of the same sets as How I Met Your Mother, so there's definitely a nostalgic element to it that I'm just not going to understand. That being said, just looking at the sitcom objectively, it's just not the freshest writing. That's the main issue for me. The jokes feel very dated. It's also very like pre-pandemic, which I know a lot of people don't like seeing COVID in shows, and I'm not saying it should have COVID, but it just feels like it's set in a world that is 5 to 10 years ago. And they explicitly say in the show, we're in 2022. So it's just hard to be immersed in it when the humor and the action is a lot more like 2015 feeling than the 2020s. By the time this video is out, there will be a 3rd episode out on Hulu. And it's a Hulu exclusive, and there's only going to be 10 episodes. So you can try it out. Its reviews in general are leaning negative, but I have heard of people here and there enjoying it, so that's why I'm like, I don't think so, especially if you're like an internet person. Like, this is the kind of show that I feel like I could show to my mom and she would like it. But someone that's like steeped in the internet would find the jokes pretty old. The show does also have a pretty solid cast, especially with Hilary Duff as the lead. I think she's a great actress. The actress of our generation, one might say. And it also has Kim Cattrall in it, which is kind of cool. I wanted to keep watching just for them, but good actors can't save the writing, in my opinion. On Rotten Tomatoes, How I Met Your Father has a 32%, and that's the critics' consensus. But the audience score is 69%. Nice. I pulled some reviews from other people on Rotten Tomatoes, both critics and just regular peasants like me. I'm gonna save those for my critique section later on. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about How I Met Your Father and also a little bit about How I Met Your Mother. How I Met Your Father is labeled as a sequel to How I Met Your Mother. It features Hilary Duff playing Sophie, a sort of perpetually single New York woman. Although she's had bad luck in love, she is still very optimistic about finding her soulmate, and she is actually a photographer. The male lead of the show is played by Christopher Lowell, who I hadn't seen in anything before. He plays Jesse, who is apparently an aspiring musician. That's what Wikipedia says. I don't remember him mentioning that. Maybe it's later on. And he works as an Uber driver, and that's how him and Sophie meet. Jesse, along with Sid, live in Ted, Marshall, and Lily's How I Met Your Mother apartment. Hilary Duff's roommate is played by Francia Raisa, and her name is Valentina, who apparently is a fashion stylist. She's a little more like wild than Sophie, Hilary Duff's character. Francia Raisa, she was the star of Life Size 2, and she donated a kidney to Selena Gomez. Those are the main things I know about her. And then we have Suraj Sharma as Sid, who is Jesse's best friend and roommate. He's engaged to Hannah, who is a surgeon. Tom Ainsley as Charlie, a British aristocrat that moves in with Valentina. So in the first episode, Valentina goes to London and comes back and brings home this rich British guy, but because he ran away with her, he lost his fortune. So his character is a lot about previously being rich and not understanding poor people things. Then we have Tien Tran as Ellen, Jesse's adoptive sister who moves to New York after her divorce from her wife. She is a lesbian character, which is nice. They try to diversify the cast a little bit. We also have Kim Cattrall as future Sophie, like I said. She is seen on camera narrating the story at the beginning of every episode, and her voice narrates it throughout. Also in this first episode, we meet Ian, who is played by Daniel Augustin. Anyway, he is Sophie's Tinder date and they really hit it off, but he's moving to Australia. We have some cast that hasn't come in yet, but I'm excited to see. Apparently Leighton Meester is going to play Meredith, and Meredith, who is Jesse's ex-girlfriend who publicly rejected. Oh! So in the pilot, they showed Jesse's very pessimistic about love. And apparently he went viral for a proposal gone wrong. He tried to propose to his girlfriend and she rejected him, and it was like a live stream or something, and that went viral, and he's known as like the guy that got rejected for a proposal. They're saying Leighton Meester was her, but they showed the video and I don't remember it being Leighton Meester. I think this Wikipedia thing is wrong, but Leighton Meester is joining the cast in a recurring role. Also, Josh Peck is going to be in the show playing a character named Drew. We don't know much else about Drew, and he was also featured in the trailer. In the first episode, they all kind of meet. There's kind of two small groups of friends / roommates here, and they all meet in this first episode and become friends. Sid has a bar that's very similar to the one in How I Met Your Mother, where they kind of end every episode talking over a beer, and that's that. In my research, I learned that they had attempted a How I Met Your Father show a lot of times. Let me back up, sorry. Let's talk about How I Met Your Mother a tiny bit. How I Met Your Mother lasted for 9 seasons. It was very beloved, especially in the first few seasons, and it sort of deteriorated towards the final seasons, according to what I saw on Wikipedia and what I've heard as well, just through the grapevine. I specifically remember when it was happening in 2014, the ending. People were upset by the ending. I don't remember what it was. I tried to look it up, but it was so bizarre. I did not understand anything. People hated the ending, that's all I know. But in general, it was pretty critically acclaimed too for the time. It was seen as very fresh. It was kind of almost a follow-up to Friends. Like, I see the timeline of sitcoms go from like Seinfeld, Friends, and How I Met Your Mother for that style of multicam sitcom. Due to the success of How I Met Your Mother, I think from the beginning, the TV network CBS was really looking to make a How I Met Your Dad. It was actually called How I Met Your Dad at first, which is silly because the obvious name is How I Met Your Father, but CBS had ordered How I Met Your Dad in 2014, and they cast it and shot a pilot, but it didn't end up getting picked up. They had a couple other attempts at making How I Met Your Father after that. Isaac Aptiker and Elizabeth Berger were set to write a new version in 2016, so this is beyond the 2014 one. But then those two ended up getting promoted to like showrunners of This Is Us, which became super huge, and I think they just abandoned this project in exchange for focusing on This Is Us. In 2017, they tried yet again. That one fell through as well. And finally, in April of 2021 is when Hulu greenlit the 10 episodes for How I Met Your Father. The casting of the 2014 How I Met Your Dad is wild. Like, it's a different setup and story than the Hilary Duff one though. But as the main character, it would have been Greta Gerwig, which is so wild. Miss Ladybird. Also, Drew Tarver was in it, who... This guy, I love this actor. You might recognize him from a few things, usually in like a smaller or supporting role. He is the star of one of the most underrated comedies of this past year or two called The Other Two. This show, y'all, see, How I Met Your Father, garbage. Sorry, I don't like to be so mean to shows, but The Other Two, as far as comedy goes, is so good. It's literally like so fresh, so modern. It's also about New York. It's just so much, the difference, it's like polar opposites of like comedy. They talk a lot about like the internet and fame and social media and kind of being viral. And so anyway, also Meg Ryan was gonna be like the Kim Cattrall role of like voiceover. This random guy from Fired Up. That movie was horrible, wasn't it? So How I Met Your Father has had a long journey. Every time they seem to start over. The 2014 version script actually leaked, and I read a little bit of it, and it was actually not so bad. Like, I was surprised. I thought it was gonna be, you know, just as bad as the Hilary Duff one, but it was actually all right. Like, I'll link the script below if y'all want to check it out, of that leaked pilot. It's so interesting to read a script. I don't read scripts often, but when I do, I'm just like, wow, like, this is good. I just didn't think it was so bad, but maybe it's better when you read it. So let's discuss the first 2 episodes a little bit. I've gone into it a tiny bit with the storylines, but basically our main character, Sophie, is sick of dating, but she's been on like 86 Tinder dates, which, mentioning Tinder so much in this show, I was just like, this is so 5 years ago. Like, we know it's all about Hinge nowadays. She's been on a million Tinder dates. She's about to delete Tinder because she had a really bad date. And then she matches with someone and she really hits it off with him, is texting and talking for a while. We start the episode where she's meeting up with him for the first time. I was really thinking he was going to be a catfish, but he wasn't. He was real. She gets in an Uber to go meet him, and the Uber is driven by Jesse. Sid is in the passenger seat because he's hanging out with Jesse and he's about to go propose to his girlfriend. They all meet kind of chaotically in the Uber. She goes on her day. It's a great date. She comes back to tell her roommate about it. That's where we're introduced to Valentina. The guy was, Ian. He was pretty perfect for Sophie, except he was moving to Australia soon. So basically it wasn't going to work out with them. Sophie was really bummed about that and was like, you know what, fuck men, we're never going to date men again. And Valentina's like, oh, awkward. I brought this guy from London and he lives here now. So that's where we meet the British guy, Charlie. And Charlie and Valentina have sort of an argumentative type of relationship, but they're also very like sexual with each other. So those are our characters. Later on, Hilary, sorry, I keep calling her Hilary, Sophie had swapped phones with Sid because they had like the same phone. Sid had mentioned he has a bar, and Sophie goes to get her phone back, swap phones. She sort of crashes the proposal party, and at this party we also meet Ellen, who is Jesse's sister. She's trying to get over her ex-wife by moving to New York City. The proposal happens. She says yes, but also has to go to surgery, and she has to get on a plane to go on surgery. So he has to go to the airport, and then Sophie needs to go to the airport to tell the guy going to Australia something. So everyone goes to the airport. This was the wild thing too. Like, this show was so outdated. It was like pre-2001 outdated, not even pre-COVID outdated. It was like pre-9/11. They all ran to the airport to catch Ian, and there's like 6 or 7 of them, and they all go in a group to the gate where Ian is about to board his flight. I'm just like, hello, did 9/11 not happen in this world either? I get not wanting to incorporate that, but like, airport security and how airports work are so ingrained in society now, like, it really breaks the illusion. So that was episode 1. Sophie and Ian don't quite work out, but it feels open-ended. It feels like Ian's gonna come back at some point to me. Episode 2 is all about Sophie's pretty down about Ian leaving, and she just wants to wallow, but Valentina convinces her to go out, and Valentina is also trying to get Charlie to get guy friends so that he's not smothering her all the time. So she's like, I'm gonna call up the guys from episode 1 that have the bar. She invites them to go to a nightclub called FOMO, where they have a lot of funny rooms. The goal of them going to the nightclub is to get Sophie to not be so depressed about Ian, as well as set up Charlie with these guys to like be friends. However, on the other side of things, Sid thinks Valentina is trying to set up Sophie and Jesse. So Sid is telling Jesse, like, this is your chance with Sophie, and this is great, and she likes you. And Jesse the whole time is like, I don't believe you, but Sid insists so much that he ends up believing that Sophie is trying to be set up with him, and it becomes awkward at the end. They end the night at the bar. Ellen at the club had been like hitting on a bunch of women, and when they're back at the bar, they ask her like, oh my god, you're so happy, like, did something go well? And she's like, all the women rejected me, but it's awesome because I'm getting over my ex-wife. And they're all like, huh, yeah, that's a good way to look at things. That's inspirational. And then they're all happy about everything. And Sophie and Jesse kind of have a more chill conversation. And for some reason, the song Drops of Jupiter was a big character in this episode because Sophie is always listening to Drops of Jupiter when she's sad. And at the very end, Jesse plays it on the jukebox, and Sophie has this moment of like, oh my god, we have the same comfort depression song. And that's kind of the gist of episode 2. I'm not going super deep into these because they're very lighthearted sitcom episodes and not the best written, so that's just kind of the overview. So let me get into some critiques and thoughts I have about these 2 episodes. Like, it's so, I don't know, I think I will finish it. I think Hilary Duff is that powerful. Also, I like Leighton Meester a lot, and I want to see her in something. I haven't seen her in something in a while. Also, Josh Peck, I like him, and I want to see how he plays out on the show. I don't know if I'm going to stop watching, but it'll be a bit of a chore to watch every week. I feel so bad because, okay, I think I've said a lot of my critiques already, but it just feels dated and the jokes are older. I do think there is an audience for it. I've always been like an NBC girl, like hardcore. Give me any NBC sitcom and I can make it work. And now I'm watching Abbott Elementary. I tried out American Auto, it wasn't my favorite, but I just like the NBC approach to comedy a lot more in general than CBS's approach, which How I Met Your Mother was a CBS show. This one is not a CBS show, but it feels like one. CBS sitcoms to me, y'all, Big Bang Theory, 2.5 Men, like these types of shows that I just cannot get into. But they have some of the biggest audiences. I feel like there's a big audience for How I Met Your Father. It's just not for me. I've been watching a lot of Hilary Duff interviews about this show. This, I think, is her best acting to date.
Just that the scripts were really good. Like when you read a good sitcom script and it doesn't need much work.
This is so shady. I'm being very petty and shady, but she keeps saying like, oh, I was not sure at first. I did not want to do it. And then she's like, but then I read the script. And the script was so good, so amazing for a sitcom. And I was like, what? You know what's funny? Hilary Duff said the first script she was given was actually from 5 years prior. Like, it was written 5 years prior, and they told her, like, we're gonna freshen it up.
And I was reading a script that was written like 5 years before, so like some of the jokes were a little old, and they're like, everything's being punched up and updated and blah, 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 but like, I just got it instantly.
This makes total sense. Like, all the jokes about, like, Tinder, and there's, like, a lot of kind of, like, sex jokes, but more like female empowered sex jokes. They talk about porn and they talk about sex toys, and I feel bad, but just in the opening line, Hilary Duff is like, can you give me that charger? My phone's belly is hungry. They also make jokes about Grindr. They're trying to make a lot more sort of like gay jokes, but not like gay as an insult.
Say what?
Well, say that something's gay when you mean it's bad. It's insulting.
Like gay as like a gay culture type of jokes. I appreciate them trying, but it honestly feels like it was created immediately after How I Met Your Mother. Like in 2014, it would have fit in just fine then. I don't know, maybe if I liked How I Met Your Mother, I would enjoy it more, but I have friends that have seen How I Met Your Mother, and some like the father and some don't. Also, the show does have a laugh track, which a lot of people don't like in this day and age. I credit The Office for killing the laugh track in comedy because I feel like that was the first mainstream comedy show that just had that single cam type format. The multicam sitcom already feels dated just as a format, so you have to be really careful about modernizing it in other ways to make up for the laugh track. Just the laugh track alone is a turnoff. And I'm not as against the laugh track as I've seen others be. I think it can be easily compensated for with good writing, good acting. And I think it's interesting because the iCarly reboot, if you haven't watched my video about the iCarly reboot, you should go check it out. I think iCarly is kind of a good example of the opposite of this type of show. How I Met Your Father and iCarly are actually extremely similar in the characters they have, the actors they have, the plot, and the humor. They're both multicam sitcoms as well. However, iCarly did it really, really well. iCarly has a really amazing writing staff. If you can't stand laugh tracks or multicam sitcoms, it's gonna be a turn off. But if you can stand that format, the writing is really, really witty. It's just fresh. It has really current jokes on it, which is really hard to do. I'm still very impressed by the iCarly reboot. I enjoyed the whole season. I think in my review I only had seen a few episodes, but it's very similar. It's like a single woman played by a beloved childhood actress, Miranda Cosgrove, Hilary Duff. Obviously, I don't think Miranda Cosgrove's at Hilary Duff's level, but like honestly, down to the best friend, iCarly and How I Met Your Father, they're both a stylist that's very like more out there, more sexual than the main character, pushing the main character out of her comfort zone. If you're interested in seeing a very similar premise and setup and characters, but vastly different results, watch the first episode of both. iCarly is on Paramount Plus. iCarly's writing is just so good. Like, they had a whole episode where they make fun of like WeWork type spaces and also MLMs wrapped into that, and it was just like so good and hilarious. Like, it's still like sitcom-y shenanigans a lot of the time. Like, it's not very grounded in reality, but the jokes are good enough that and relevant enough that it's interesting. And I just really advocate for the iCarly reboot, not just because one of the creators of it shared my video on her Instagram story. And it's crazy because I went back to watch How I Met Your Mother to be like, okay, well maybe I wouldn't like How I Met Your Mother either because I don't like the humor of How I Met Your Father. But then How I Met Your Mother is like pretty good. Like, I watched it and it's not a show I want to continue watching. It's not my style. It's very problematic and dated, but I can take a step back and think about the time. It was like 2009 or something. I could see the quality of How I Met Your Mother, and I was sad that like How I Met Your Father just didn't have that same feel. Let's look at some of the reviews from Rotten Tomatoes. Melanie McFarland from Salon.com. The experience of How I Met Your Father has a lot in common with a terrible cover version of a solid pop song. We're talking Miley Cyrus' rendition of Smells Like Teen Spirit awful. Okay, I'm upset. This Miley Cyrus slander is not acceptable. Miley Cyrus, it feels like her rock style that she's been doing the past few years is like the most suited for her. I just don't appreciate this reviewer comparing How I Met Your Father to Miley Cyrus. Matthew Gilbert from the Boston Globe said, tonally, it's a clumsy blend of obvious rom-com tropes, the chasing someone down the airport in a pre-9/11 fashion. Clara Wardlow from RogerEbert.com. These sources. There is, in a sense, nothing fundamentally wrong with the show, but there's also nothing right about it either. I don't think that's true. I think it's just not great. Inko King of the Washington Post said, not a trace of the graceful aplomb that How I Met Your Mother exhibited, even in its pilot episode, is present in the early installments of the Hulu series, which looks and tastes like a cake on Nailed It. I think that's a better reference than the Miley Cyrus one, because Miley Cyrus is great at rock music. Okay, we get it. Sorry. This looks and tastes like a cake on Nailed It. First of all, how does she know how a cake on Nailed It tastes? We don't know. Maybe she's been a guest judge. Nailed It is a baking show where like regular people go and make cakes and try to make them fancy, but the results aren't very good because it's regular people. How I Met Your Father is like a cake on Nailed It. A good one. Kevin Carr of fat guys at the movies. The show's fine. I don't hate it, but it just doesn't have a magic touch yet. He gave it a 2 out of 4, but he also seems optimistic about it. Says, doesn't have the magic touch yet. We have a positive review here. Nicole Gallucci of Mashable. Nearly halfway through the first season, the sequel isn't legendary yet. But as the original series taught us, sometimes things are worth the wait. What privilege, she has access to the first half of the season. Y'all need to make me famous already so I can get early access to shows and stuff. Like, imagine I could bring it to you right hot off the press. Next, let's see some of the user reviews. Here's a 1 star. How could anyone say this show is good? Fire the writers and start over, if need be. Here's a positive review, 5 stars. I enjoyed it even if it's not as funny as I expected it to be. She gave it 5 stars. This is not a 5-star sentence. Girl. Bill S. gave it 3.5 stars and said, How I Met Your Father is off to a decent start. Characters have potential, but it has a ways to go to escape How I Met Your Mother's shadow. Enjoying it so far. That sounds more 5-star than the last one. It's 3.5 stars. Half a star from Brian B. Watched about 30 seconds of this and changed the channel after the main character baby talks about her phone being hungry. I do agree that was a very cringy moment, and I think it was meant to be cringy. So I know I discussed this moment being stupid earlier. I think it was meant to make Hilary Duff's character look cringy, but it was just cringy. Julian S. gave it 4 stars and said, I wouldn't say that the pilot made me laugh as much as the one of How I Met Your Mother, but it was still funny-ish. It was not as bad as people were saying on Twitter. I've actually haven't seen much conversation on Twitter about this show, like at all, but I'm sure I agree with whatever Twitter's saying. Even the people that give it a positive review, like, their sentences about it are not positive. They're like, it's funny-ish, or it's not as funny as I expected. It's like, these people are too generous with their stars. Unfortunately, I agree with a lot of these reviews. I feel like the consensus is not great. And it sucks because you do hear Hilary Duff interviewed and talk about it, and she seems so excited for it. She seems to really believe in it and love it and love the direction and the script, and I'm like, girl, what script are you reading? So let me talk a little bit about the positives. I've touched on them, but Hilary Duff and her enthusiasm is one. I think she is producing it, so she probably has a bigger stake in this and promoting it well. The way she speaks of it sounds like it's the next amazing, innovative show. I love seeing Hilary Duff on my TV. I didn't watch Younger, unfortunately, but I've heard it's good. Let me know if I should watch Younger, because I have heard good things about that show. And Hilary Duff looks amazing. Like, Hollywood actresses and actors need to pay attention or ask her what she's doing, because whatever work she's getting done, Botox and plastic surgery wise, she's doing it very naturally, but like still looks great. So I love her and I like her enthusiasm. I wish it was backed up by the quality of the show. I love Kim Cattrall being there, and Hilary and some of the other actors in the interviews I watched were talking about her. Apparently she filmed all of her scenes in one day, and she's like the cool one of Sex and the City, and she's not in the reboot, which was the whole thing. And Hilary speaks very highly of her, and it's like she fangirled on set about her, said she was super cool and nice. Kim Cattrall is definitely a highlight. They also seem to have a good reverence for How I Met Your Mother and trying to incorporate like the apartment, and apparently there's some swords on the fireplace that seemed important. I hadn't watched How I Met Your Mother before, so at the end of episode 1 they walk into this apartment and they like pause for like gasping of the audience. I was like, I think this apartment's important. Also, I kind of wonder about if this show is sort of the Lizzie McGuire reboot that never was. I wonder if for Hilary this serves as sort of that outlet she was trying to achieve with Lizzie McGuire. A lot of the premise of this show feels like what the Lizzie McGuire reboot was going to be about. So I hope Hilary Duff is like excited that she gets to sort of tell a story that she was looking to play with Lizzie. She seems really sad that the Lizzie McGuire reboot did not end up happening. We all are. We're all devastated, aren't we? What made me think of this was because in episode 2, Hilary Duff wears this outfit that looks just like the Lizzie McGuire reboot photo we got with her and Gordo. She looks very Lizzie McGuire in some of these outfits that she has for the show, so I feel like it is a little bit inspired. There was like a recent report though that the Lizzie McGuire reboot's plot was gonna be that Lizzie gets a divorce or has a big breakup and actually moves back in with her parents. And I was like, that sounds amazing. So now that I found that out, I don't feel like this show is the same premise as the Lizzie McGuire reboot. But it's just interesting how I wonder if any inspirations from the Lizzie McGuire reboot were reworked to fit into How I Met Your Father. I know I hate reboots and I'm over it. I hate I don't want to see no goddamn reboot ever again, but Lizzie McGuire, man, I don't care how horrible the writing is. It needs to happen. It just does. Oh, okay. Anyway, so that's that. Sadly, not a lot of positives for this show, though I do think it has its audience, perhaps. Some of the reviews are not very hopeful. I don't have much hope for it being amazing. I'm probably just going to tune in to see some of my favorite childhood actors and not much else. As far as the other cast, they were very, fine. I didn't have any complaints, but no, standout moments. I think the main guy, Jesse, looks a lot like Ted. I feel like I couldn't tell them apart. I don't think. I mean, it's not supposed to be that serious, so, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. And I'm not judging you for it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying I don't think most people would. I think that's all I have for my thoughts on How I Met Your Father. I was hoping for a more excited video, and sometimes that's just how TV is. Hopefully they get renewed. I think Hilary is really hoping for renewal. Who cares? Spend Hulu's money. I don't give a shit. Let me know your thoughts on How I Met Your Father, especially if you were a fan of How I Met Your Mother, and how you're feeling about this spiritual sequel to it. I would love to hear about it. You can give spoilers for How I Met Your Mother. I don't care. I tried to read the ending, and who knows what it meant. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed. I put out new videos twice a week about TV, pop culture, internet trends, and other miscellaneous things. And you can follow me at miscellaneous on Instagram or Twitter to find out about new videos, or just turn on the bell notification here on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!